Let's bring in our chief news anchor, Kieran Gilbert, and business editor Ross Greenwood. Kieran, to start with you, this will be something we'll hear straight away from the government. They've got this thing to latch on to, lowest since 1974. And they'll point out, Jim Chalmers, the one that said the biggest test of the government during the pandemic and post was the unemployment number.
The other thing Jim Chalmers says is that the government's nudging up to $1 trillion in debt with not a lot to show for it. This is what the government says they will show for it, this record low unemployment rate, or as you say, Tom, the best in many decades, down to 3.9%. It's right on market expectations. The RBA expects unemployment to be down to 3.75% by June. So this is really the emblem of the government's economic response to the pandemic. This is what they hope will see them re-elected on Saturday. The problem for them in all of this is that other big shift in the election, that being the start in the trajectory upwards on interest rates, happened right in the middle of the campaign as well. I guess the key economic debate here in a political sense is which one carries the day in terms of the impact of the rates and the concerns around cost of living and the disparity between wages and inflation, or this number, this very impressive unemployment number down to 3.9%.
One of those things sometimes, when you cast your mind back to the GFC and Labor sort of said in the years afterwards, people didn't realise what we'd saved them from, that if you haven't lost your job, and people haven't, well, then you sort of don't know what you saved from. So that might be another factor. Ross, look, unavoidably good news to have an unemployment rate this low. But what's intriguing as well is that the government talks about this jobs creation plan and putting another number on it. Right now, the thing we need to keep economic growth going are workers and skilled workers in some areas. This is, good news on one hand, but it just shows how much people are crying out for more workers in some industries.
Which also goes to show just how much more immigration is required into Australia right now, which doesn't necessarily play well in an election period with some parts of the community. But there's no doubt that one of the answers to try and take pressure off the labour markets and try and stop the wage rises from becoming even more inflationary and pushing interest rates up even higher is to bring in more imported workers. But just in terms of Kieran and what he's saying, you do actually, out of these numbers today, get a little sense out of just how many jobs might have been saved, or really the actions of the government might have attributed to some of the changes. In March 2020, so as the pandemic started to hit and people were at that time, remember, queuing up outside of Centrelink offices, worried about their prospects, there are today 400,000 more people in employment than what there were in those times. The second thing is also that the number unemployed is dropping dramatically. In fact, it's almost negligible as compared with the number of people who now have a job. And so this is the reason why, if people generally these days want a job, kids included, they can get it. So the youth unemployment rate here, lower, is a significant improvement. The underemployment rate, also a significant improvement. So this is great for government also because, of course, remember, more than half of the money it collects each year in taxes comes from the workers who have got jobs.
Yeah, so on the economy, I guess more broadly, Ross, and what you're talking about, is this number a bit of a brief, arrival at 3.9%, given we're talking about an increase rate of interest rates for the Reserve Bank, and already talk out there when you look at the share market, people suddenly feel less wealthy, house prices as well. Retailers saying people are going to be already, tightening their purse strings. Is this a momentary hit at 3.9?
I don't think so. I think the momentum of it continues for some time. And indeed, I've made parallels before between this period and between the period leading into the 1991 recession. They are significant similarities. The big difference is the employment story. At that time, the unemployment rate was much, much higher. And so Australia was vulnerable. The housing markets were vulnerable. Right now, if Australians can keep their jobs, if inflation does not spiral out of control, leading interest rates to spiral out of control, causing problems for the housing market, then that is going to be the key to save Australia's economy long term. So it's trying to maintain these jobs for people and really remember that the Reserve Bank next year says that this unemployment rate could be as low as 3.25%. So in other words, that means whatever pressures are in the employment market right now could be exacerbated over the next 12 months.
Kieran, this won't come as a shock to anyone. This was the expectation, so Labor no doubt will be ready for a response. Where do they go here?
Well, they go to the idea of, well, the point made yesterday will continue today in terms of wages growth, not anywhere near where inflation is. That was also a number that we hadn't seen for a number of decades yesterday, that disparity between wages growth and inflation. They'll go to that. They'll go to the issue of security, job security. It's not just the number of jobs, it's whether people feel secure in them, whether they're getting enough dollars, getting enough pay. They'll be the two critiques you'll hear from Jim Chalmers and Katie Gallagher. In the much anticipated costings, Tom, I'm told that will be delivered around 1:30, so not far, not long to wait now for the Labor Party costings, with Katie Gallagher and Jim Chalmers to deliver those, with 48 hours to go until election day. But it's been a flurry of economic activity, from the wages, unemployment, and of course the rates earlier in the campaign. Really the backdrop for election 2022. And as I said before, the question is, which one will carry the day on Saturday? Will it be the reassurance about the labour market, about people getting a job if they want to, or will it be the overhang of cost of living, the interest rate question, and just the difficulty in getting by these days? Will that be the carrying argument that will go a long way to decide the outcome this weekend?